what's up you guys, The Curious Owl here, and today I am doing my October wrap-up. So this month I ended up finishing 4 out of the 5 books that I wanted to get through this month, so that's a really great thing. I haven't been able to get through a majority of my TBR in quite some time. A lot of it's been because I've been super busy, but thankfully this month was a little easier on me somehow, and I think part of that is because I just really found a good way to continue reading throughout the day, and I was able to get through a lot of good books and get through a large chunk of a book that I've been meaning to get to for so long that I finally got started with. And while I didn't finish it this month, I'm very excited to try to finish it in November because I think that I might find some time here and there to actually get through a lot of it because I've really enjoyed what I've read so far. So this month I read a total of 1,328 pages and about 7 hours and 10 minutes worth of audiobooks. I listened to 2 books that were on my personal TBR or that were basically in my personal stash. I read 2 books that were either borrowed from the library or from a family member. I read half of a physical book because I basically split one of my audiobooks with a physical one by basically kind of like reading off and on between the two. I read 3 ebooks and 1.5 audiobooks. As like I said, one of the audiobooks I read was kind of split between the physical book and the audiobook. And then I actually ended up reading one book that was sent to me, which was a reviewed book that is a new debut coming out in November, which you guys can go see the review of. So the first book that I completed was my first audiobook for the month, which was The Gunslinger by Stephen King. This is the first book in the Dark Tower series, which is basically like this sci-fi slash horror slash western kind of story, and it's about this guy who's called the Gunslinger who is looking for this guy called the Man in Black, who you kind of assume is some kind of version of death. That's how he's described a lot of the time in different scenarios that he is talked about within the story. And like I said, the Gunslinger is basically trying to find him. A lot of the story is told in flashback, as the Gunslinger has to do a lot of expositionary work in telling a lot about how he became the Gunslinger and why he's kind of going after the Man in Black, and also some events that kind of helped him get to where he is in the beginning of the book as he's telling his story to other characters. And while I really liked that aspect of the story, I think it definitely was hindered with the audiobook because I don't feel like I really saw the transition between the memory and the present time within the story. I think that if I had read the physical book, it would have definitely been a lot more smoother of a transition for me. So that's probably part of the drawback with having read the audiobook. Also, I will say that I felt like the audiobook was a little slow at times to the point where I definitely felt like I was going to sleep a couple different times throughout the book, but there were some really interesting characters that I was very, very enthralled by. The Gunslinger, I think, is a character who definitely is kind of like a morally gray character, if you will, because he does some really bad things, but he thinks that it's for the good, and you kind of understand the reasoning why he has to do some things within the book. But, you know, it's still a really interesting book. He's basically trying to avenge something that's happened. I think that he's a really strong character, and I would really like to see what he does in the future, because there was a whole aspect where he talks about his growing up and becoming the Gunslinger that kind of set him up to go on this journey that he's going on now, and I really want to see kind of how more of his past plays into the reasoning why he is where he is. But like I said, I felt like it was a little overdone. I thought it was a little dry and definitely put me to sleep quite a few times, and I liked it enough to continue the series, but I was just really, really lost a lot of the time with it, with going from flashback to flashback, and I ended up giving it overall like a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't like the best thing on the face of the earth, but it definitely kept me interested to see kind of what the rest of the series is about, considering that I had a lot of friends tell me that they really enjoyed it. The next book that I read was part of my reread series for the Beautiful Creatures series. This month I read Dangerous Creatures by Kami Garcia and Margaret Stohl. This is the first book in a spin-off series to the Beautiful Creatures series, which deals with Ethan and Lena. The spin-off series focuses on 2 secondary characters named Link and Ridley, who basically go off to New York City because Ridley tells Link that she has this gig lined up for him as a drummer to play for this band in New York City, and that it's going to be a great time. But what Link doesn't know is that Ridley is actually in a lot of trouble and kind of in a way sold Link off to somebody to pay off a debt that she had. And in the background of all of this, there is some kind of nefarious plot going on to try and kill off Link and Ridley because somebody from the past has come back and decided that he wants to enact revenge on these two for killing him in the past. So as far as the spin-off series beginning, I thought it was really strong. I really did like a lot of it, and this book really focuses a lot on Ridley in terms of her understanding kind of what she wants, and the fact that she's struggling a lot with the fact that she's a siren, but she still has feelings for Link in some capacity, and that's very hard for her to try to understand because as a siren, she's not supposed to really have any true feelings for any one person. She's supposed to kind of just be ditzy and kind of float from one person to the next, and she's never supposed to really settle down because it's not exactly in her nature. But throughout this book, she really struggles with it because she does really care about Link, and she cares about the fact that she sold him off without him ever having any knowing of it, and the fact that she also has put herself and him in danger with the fact that there's this other deal that she's made that she doesn't know what's going to happen with it. She doesn't know anything about what it is that she has to do or that Link has to do, and it's scary for her. At the same time, though, I felt like the story was really dragged down with the fact that I just felt like Ridley was making so many stupid decisions throughout this entirety of this novel, like to the point where I just wanted to stop reading it because I just couldn't get over the fact that what she was doing was so stupid. Like, I felt like she knew better a lot of the time than what she actually did. Like, she knew better than to do some things, but she just decided not to because it was completely gonna go against what she is on the inside, when she knew in her head that it's the right thing to do or it's the smart thing to do. That didn't deter me exactly entirely from the book, but definitely put a huge damper for me in terms of, I think, the overall enjoyment of the story, just because I feel like I've seen Ridley do the same thing over and over and over again, where she's expecting different results, but nothing is changing. She's doing the same exact thing, expecting something else to happen, and nothing does. It goes back to being the same exact thing that she's been doing before, and I just felt like I got so tired of that. But I think Ridley definitely has changed a lot, and she does change a lot throughout this book to where I felt comfortable giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, but I really wish that there was something to just get her to stop being stupid. The next book that I ended up reading and finishing was Saving Death by R.L. and Dean. This was a book I was sent to by Off Tones Publishing, so thank you to Off Tones for sending this to me. It is the final debut novel of 2018 for Off Tones and is R.L. Dean's debut novel. It is one of my probably most favorite books out of Off Tones. I really enjoyed it a lot, and you guys can go check out my review for it down in the description. I basically thought of it as a really interesting gothic paranormal romance with an insta-love that really made me conflicted because I hated it, but I also was kind of rooting for it in some ways, and I didn't know how to feel about it. But I definitely felt like there was a lot of pacing problems within it, and I felt like there were some things that could have happened a lot earlier than they did. Saving Death ended up getting a 4 out of 5 stars for me, and if you guys would like to see my full thoughts on it, you guys can go check out the video that I've linked down below. And finally, the last book that I finished reading within October was Blood Magic by Danielle Rose. This is a book that I also got from Off Tones Publishing several months ago and finally picked up. This was my September pick of the month that I did not end up being able to read, so I put it into my October TBR. This is what I would consider to be a new adult vampire witch romance story because it deals with a lot of those things. It definitely is a little bit more racy than I think young adult readers would be accustomed to, which is why I think it's kind of more of a new adult, because it's not exactly up to the level of adult fiction that I've read before, but definitely has a lot more sex scenes than I think young adult readers would be comfortable with. This is actually the second book in a trilogy that Danielle Rose has written, entailing a girl named Ava who basically has grown up as a witch her entire life, has known how to be a witch her entire life, and was always taught to hate vampires and destroy them. But then on the eve of her essentially like this big ritual where she's supposed to come into her own, this kind of coming of age ritual, her coven is attacked by a vampire pack and she is killed, and then finds out that she's been revived, but as a vampire. And so she's now this kind of weird hybrid of both witch and vampire, which is very uncommon, and she has to learn how to become a vampire and continue to use her powers, and also now this new assortment of powers that she didn't realize she had, but understands now that she is able to use them. And that's a lot of what this book is going into specifically, is her development of these powers, and also trying to find the headmistress basically of this vampire coven that she is now a part of, because in the end of the first book she goes missing after being taken off by this vampire coven of rogue vampires. Ava and her coven now have to go off and find her, and she has to figure out a way to use her powers and find her, and also try to figure out more about herself and understand who she is and what she is and how she's going to save essentially both witches and vampires. So I really like this one a lot. I definitely think that it was a great continuation of the series. I read the first one about December of last year, so some things were a little fuzzy for me, but I think that the second book did a really great job of explaining a lot of things right away that I would have forgotten about in terms of kind of what happened at the end of the last book and kind of going into what is to be expected for this one. I will say though that I feel like what happens with a lot of the Offtones publishing books is that they're very, very fast paced and they're very, very short. And I think that with this one, I definitely felt that it was fast-paced and a little too short for my liking, but I still really enjoyed it, and I just think that if things were drawn out a little bit more, if action scenes were drawn out a little more, and there was a little bit more explanation about Ava and Sebastian, who was kind of her mentor throughout this entire book, I would really enjoy it a lot more. I just felt like there was a lot of room for development and a lot of room for growth, because it just felt like there was something missing and I wasn't quite sure what it was. But overall, I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm very excited to be able to read the last book in the series that I think is going to have an interesting end to this overall story, because I don't know where the story is going to go at this point. I don't know what's to be expected for Ava and for Sebastian and Jacek, who is Ava's love interest. I just don't know what's all going to happen within that triangle, and I hope that with the last book, Danielle Rose brings the story to a really satisfying end, because I've read a lot of trilogies that have really had crappy endings to them, and I hope that this is not one of them. And to end off this video, I will talk a little bit about my thoughts of my other book that I did not finish this month, which was A Game of Thrones, the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R.R. Martin. This was my October TBR pick for the month, and I didn't get to finish it, but what I have read has been really, really interesting. At this point, when I am filming this video, I have gotten to about page 283, so I'm over a quarter of the way through it, but I kind of switched with this one between the audiobook and the physical book, because the audiobook had been really great to listen to. I really enjoyed the narration of it, and I felt like it really did a lot for me in terms of helping me with getting through the book. I think that starting off with the audiobook also kept me with being enthralled in the story, to where I think that if I had read the physical book starting out, I wouldn't have been as interested in it. But I'm really interested in it a lot now. I think that it's definitely a story that I'm going to continue to eat through when I get a chance to get through more of it in November, but I can't say more than that just because I haven't finished the book. But that is it for this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up. Let me know what you guys ended up reading in October down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed anything you read, if you read any of these books and have any thoughts on them, and if you haven't already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!